going back to flywheels, and I'll present my screen to you at this point because I do have a
Yeah,
deck
go
that I
for it.
think might be relevant.
While you're
And
doing that, I wanted to also just pile on another layer here that I think is really interesting. And it might be related to what you're showing here. In your demo, I was looking at the shows, the visits that people were making to your company's webpage on LinkedIn. And it was like 2,800 website viewers or viewers on your page. And based on how you approach things, I could tell like this is intentional. You've got people that are coming to you uh, that you want there, and the ICP is aligned, and the number is 2,800. So I thought, well, geez, what if I was a typical sales leader, and my BDRs or my SDRs or BDM folks are looking at 200 views and that come to their site. And so, is there a pathway or some gotchas or lesson learned to get from 200 to 2,800?
yeah. Honestly, I think a lot of people are just, and I appreciate you putting this webinar together. What you're essentially doing is like in many ways is like this is marketing. Like what we're doing right now, this is marketing, right? And I think fundamentally a lot of companies, a lot of people I talk to are afraid of putting themselves out there. They're afraid of having conversations. They're afraid of talking about the core problems. And so it's easy to hide behind an ad with some text on it, or it's easy to hire an expensive agency to make a video for you. Guess what sells? It's like authentic, real conversations from people who've been there, done that, have been in your shoes before, and have a way to solve your problems. And I think more people need to think about that. And I think to your point, like, yeah, let's talk about how people can get all that sort of aligned. So I'm just gonna breeze through this very quick, but
Yeah.
this is kind of what we talked about, right? It's just like people spamming people. It's just like, okay, let's do a lot of outbound, throw a bunch of people into Outreach or Apollo, drop them in a sequence, and then whatever comes out of it comes out of it. And then a lot of companies will be like, okay, let's use some AI, let's personalize these emails. Does nominally better. You have triggers, you have all these things that you can improve conversion. That's great. But you're still fundamentally doing outbound. You're still fundamentally reaching out to people on very crowded channels. And so that's still problematic. And so then what a lot of companies will try doing is, okay, let's throw paid on it so we get some inbound. Once again, we just talk about all these problems with paid is like if you don't know what you're doing, it's incredibly expensive. It's a great way to just like burn your budget unless you're careful.
And if you're doing
And
email campaigns, like you mentioned before, in the wake of the new rules on Google, you're blowing out your domain or you're blowing out the domain.
exactly, you can't be sending that much email anymore.
Yep.
Um, And maybe there's some like perverse incentives here where like companies like LinkedIn and Google want you to spend on ads. And so they're limiting your ability to like direct outreach to people. That's a separate conversation, but that's there as well. And so I think most companies just stop here. Like this is truly all they do. You know, like we're going to go hard in terms of setting up like a big BDR, SDR team, have them do a bunch of outbound. We're going to have our demand gen team run a ton of ads, and that's it. This is how we do it. Most capital inefficient thing ever, right? Because you have to pay for all that headcount. You have to think about like what is the payback on every demo or opportunity your BDRs and SDRs are booking. But think about like the CAC payback on all those ads you're spending on. And so this is like the era of this is essentially in many ways over. And so I think a lot of companies need to think about, okay, like, and the way I place these here is very intentional. I'm trying to show you like how you can build a flywheel here. But essentially, like I think companies need to start thinking about organic a lot more. And organic can take a lot of forms. It's like newsletters. It's like this type of webinar. It's like posting on LinkedIn. It's like your website content. It's resources, playbooks, guides, like whatever you want. Just tell the world like what's out there. Heck, before this conversation, you were learning from Lauren, one of our customers, about PLG SEO. That's just something that we're a resource we're putting out into the world so that people can self-educate themselves. And so I think more companies need to be doing this. talking with their customers, sharing customer stories, educational content. And you need to be doing this both in push and pull. So push is things like LinkedIn, your newsletter, and then pull is stuff like SEO. And I mean, when I say SEO, I mean actually creating useful content. I think a lot SEO is a dirty word where a lot of people think SEO is just like defining, writing these garbage articles on like what is X or something along those lines. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for like thoughtful SEO. For example, I was looking into how to like think about comp structure for our AE recently. Couldn't find anything good online, and I thought to myself, hey, if there was a company that sold to sales leaders or founders with building sales teams, this would be a great piece of content for them to have on their website because I would be on their website. I'd be now educated about their product. If only somebody would actually bother to actually create that great guide, thoughtful guide on how to company doesn't exist. Um, and so you have organic. I think this is where sales and marketing need to start working together. So now I think once you have good product marketing, you really understand your buyer. That translates into good content marketing. So you can kind of do this at scale. You can create the right webinars, newsletters, blog posts, what you have, whatever have you. And then you need to actually get your sales team to be using these assets and resources. If your sales team just continues to like blanket people with what I showed you earlier, there's no point. Like you have sales and marketing acting independently. And so what you really need to do is turn your sales team into social sellers. So get all that content that your marketing team is producing, get your sales team to be using that, get them to be posting that on their accounts, get them to be having thoughtful conversations and showing up as consultants, as thought leaders that your prospects want to connect with. And so now when your BDR cold calls somebody, they don't swear at them and hang up. Instead, they're like, you know what? Like I follow you on LinkedIn. You have a lot of great stuff. I'll hear you out for a minute. That's actually something that happens to Ryan, our BDR. He tells me this all the time. It's just like, partly since I started social selling and putting stuff out there, people respect me more. People want to talk to me more because they think I can actually solve their problems. Um, and so we need to get sales teams to actually be sharing this type of thought leadership content, sharing like helpful resources, both in their outbound as well as into the world on like platforms like LinkedIn or honestly wherever your ICP lives. And so you're starting to see this flywheel. You're starting to see how the content is making its way back into sales. And I think the last part of this puzzle is intent data. And I know intent data has a lot of bad connotations to it, and that's because people are looking at like third-party intent data from like Bumbora or other platforms. But I think there is value in trying to understand, okay, like who is actually engaging with my LinkedIn posts, who's visiting my website, what are they consuming, and how do I understand or how do I build a profile on this account based on like what they consume, and how do I use that in terms of the other types of content I recommend to them? How do I use that in terms of the ads that I show them? How do I use that in terms of the content my sales team or messaging my sales team uses when I reach out to them? And so that's going to help you drop your conversion rate or like increase your conversion rate on outbound. It also means your sales team has to reach out to fewer people because you have those limits. You can't be reaching out to everybody anymore. So how do they reach out to fewer people who are in market, who are driven already to engage with you because you put out these lures through content? How are you going to figure out what other content should I produce based on like what has previously worked, what previously drove revenue? How do I create more of that? And then finally, how do I actually pull back my ad spend and make sure that it's effective ad spend and not wasting time, money on like things which are ineffective, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, so that I spend more of my budget on people who are in market, already consuming stuff, already engaging with our webinars, with our blog posts, with whatever we're putting out there. And so what you end up with is this flywheel of organic, sales, paid, all working together and building on top of each other, as opposed to all of them kind of operating independently. And this is, I think, the foundation for a scalable go-to-market where you can actually be more capital efficient, as opposed to a go-to-market where you're just doing kind of like dumb outbound or dumb ad spend, and then praying and hoping for the best, and nothing really builds on top of each other.
You've outlined a great